This is First Contact, Stories of the Call Center.
We have to seek out the opportunities. And so that may be for some of us, moving and doing something different. Some of us are forced to, but thinking about those opportunities, think about where's the place to go. You had mentioned something about AI and artificial intelligence and all of that. A lot of people in the contact center industry may think that, gosh, it's going to do away with agents and agents' jobs. This is a problem. And the fact is that all of those AI solutions have to be taught by somebody. They don't perform well by themselves in isolation. They have to be fed knowledge. So why don't you be that knowledge person that helps to feed it? That way you're actually, protecting yourself in regards to your livelihood and your family, because you're adapting. Going back to Darwinism, what species are the ones that are most successful and thrive the most? It's the ones that adapt. So you have to be part of, that adaptation.
Totally understand. And it makes sense to be able to look back and say, as you adapt and as you're able to see these areas that need improvement and change from a leadership, though, in a hierarchy where the leadership sometimes gets a filtered view of what's happening in the trenches, right? What's happening in the actual room where your team is really the extension of your business with your consumer, or where you're trying to have these touch points with your business. How do you actually get any insight or things that you could say, how do you get the leadership to know when these things that need to get changed, where you need to adapt, have to occur? So there's this gap that exists between middle management or upper management versus the leadership.
Yeah, I refer to what you're talking about as a disconnection between the head and the feet. Okay, so we have the head of the organization, the top of the organization, who's setting strategy and all of these, visionary type of things. But then when it filters all the way down, the feet, the front line, isn't connected with that. And because there's a lot of mixed messages that occur as that waterfall, starts to flow. And so we may have people at the very top of the organization, when they say and talk about customer experience, it isn't what's being delivered on the front line. And so what's important is really that front line learns how to communicate up. So those agents, those supervisors, those managers, those directors, those VPs, whatever your hierarchy is, but they have to be able to speak the language of the people at the top. So if you're always talking about your contact center in regards to efficiency-based metrics, guess what you are? You're a machine. You're not a deliverer of the experience. Also, when you start talking about the stories that are told in the contact center, those stories that are told about the contact center need to be the stories from the customer, right? So if you are asked, for example, how's things going down in the call center when you're in that elevator ride or you're on that call, and, sitting there and replying to that and saying, well, our abandon rate was down today, or we did a good job with, our schedule adherence, you're shooting yourself in the foot. What you need to be doing is communicating stories of the customer, right? So if that question is asked, you need to be at the ready and say, oh, well, we had this one customer where he had this problem, and this is what happened. This is how we either fixed it or how we have this chronic problem we cannot correct. We have a systematic problem or systemic problem. Those are the conversations that you should have about your contact to your people who are at the top of the organization, not the things about your metrics.
Well, it's really good to hear that, because everyone says, you can't manage what you can't measure. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And when you think about that, you go back to the outcomes, right? What are the outcomes that a business wants, especially within a call center? Yes, there are financial aspects or business aspects of running the call center, but ultimately, if you're talking about your interactions with your customers, there's everything from how difficult and how much effort it takes for them to interact with your brand and business. There's how many things they can do without needing you. And then when they get to you, are they getting to the right person at the right time? Are they able to actually get the things they want without having to constantly repeat themselves, or the amount of friction points that they have in trying to get to somebody? And so there's that balance between the cost and the services that you provide, and whether or not the customer is actually getting what they need, when they need it, how they need it. And I think now more than ever, with being able to communicate through SMS, through web chat, through email, social media, video in many instances, you're now putting yourself in a position to communicate with customers where they want to be communicated with. But how do you go about doing all that, especially today in a world where teams are remote? Maybe it was easy for them to change. Maybe it was difficult. They're still in that transition, right? And so when you think of almost everyone being remote now, or at least those who are not in essential workers, which I know in many cases you said they're heroes as well, those in particular heroes that are out there in these jobs that are doing essential work, uh, how do managers and supervisors work through a period like this, being able to balance the essential work of the people that are heroes, and separately those right now that they're looking at purely, I just need to make sure my metrics are good, I just need to make sure these numbers are hit, and they're really not looking at the bigger picture of, I'll tell you right now, I've talked to a lot of leaders that have said today, now more than ever, they've had really, really good experiences of companies they've had to interact with, and some that have been really bad and have never been like that before, which is interesting to see the difference that happens during this period of time.
Yeah. Um, to me, and it really this is going back to some of that cultural stuff, right? And talking about the core four. So when you start talking about the core four of the organization, do they align with your core four? And we talked about that. So if I talk about the four core elements of the organization, it's being able to deliver upon those. And so, like, for example, you talk about the Walmart. Are you going to go to Walmart, and expect some type of high-end, boutique retail experience? I hope not. They're not going to deliver upon those, right? So does your company have a very clear identity? And so if your company has a very clear identity, this is the opportunity to really just focus on delivering upon that. And then the metrics are going to be where they're going to be. Now, however, if you are in an organization that is just focused on the metrics, and especially at this time, if you can't focus in on the customer as a human being instead of a widget, or your people as a human being, instead of an object, that's going to be a problem. And so I would dare to say that for many people in the contact center industry, that's where you start having the violation in your core four. I couldn't stand that. When I was in an environment that was heavy metrics based and, hey, just give me as they would say, a hiney in the seat, so what, we're turning over, just hire more. We'll find better ones. I didn't work well in that environment. Because do you think they're focused in on learning and development and wanting to people to be successful? Absolutely not. So you have to start thinking even about yourself. Am I aligned? Am I in the right fit? So here's your opportunity to say, okay, well, I have to do this now for a little while, but once things break, I need to invest in myself. Don't wait for the company to do it for you, so that you have more opportunities to go and find that right fit.